Hey YEGnation, we're here in Ward 6 on Jasper Ave in Scott Mckeen's office. It's very nice to meet you.
Good to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having us. And as you might know or you might not know, in Ward 6, Scott Mckeen is running for re-election. He was the councillor here previously. So Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you've done so far for Ward 6 and what you have planned.
I'll go back a little further. I was a journalist for years in this town. I was with the Edmonton Journal for 24 years. 12 of those I covered City Council, either as a reporter, and then my last 8 years I was at the Journal. I was a City Hall columnist. There are actually two or three of the people on council that I served with this term. I'd written critical columns about them when I was a columnist, so that was a little bit awkward for a while, but we got past that. So, and I tell people this, I brought that mindset to City Council. That label politicians still, it kind of rests heavily on me. I don't like it. But I also know from all those years covering City Hall that everything in this town eventually leads to City Hall. Whether it's the Oilers, whether it's the Eskimos, whether it's arts, culture, music, poverty, it all ends up there. Because there's some decision to be made around a new facility, investments in cultural grants, whatever. It all ends up there. So it's really interesting. And I think that my pitch to voters on why they should participate is because the feel and the future of their city, a lot of it is determined at City Hall. And if you like the direction that we've been going this last 4 years, things like bike lanes we're just starting to do, but it's very symbolic, I think, of the kind of transportation culture we want to bring to the city, and that is very democratic. Not everybody wants to own a car. Not everybody can afford to buy a car. But if you can get yourself a bike, we want to get you safely around town, which means some people will have the opportunity then to get to post-secondary easier or get to a job easier. So that often gets lost in excuse me, the discussion about bike lanes. Is some people think it's this kind of weird green environmental thing, hipster thing that we're doing. It's way beyond that. And there were already a lot of people riding bikes into the downtown, and unfortunately there were a lot of car cyclist accidents. So it's a safety issue too, and it's really important. So there's an important symbolic decision we made. Our whole policy and campaign around infill housing is for the next 30 to 50 years and for emerging generations. I understand that a lot of people who have owned homes in communities for years or decades are not always thrilled with the infill as it's played out. I get it. It's changing the communities. But it seems to me we are duty bound as leaders in this city to revitalize those neighborhoods. We have to find a way to attract new people into those communities, and hopefully some kids, because schools have been closing in the inner city, and because a lot of the kids are out in the suburbs. We have to try to balance that trend so we have lively, vibrant inner city neighborhoods. So the infill is important to that. What does the infill do? At a very least, it adds density to the area. So you will have more housing, for example, 2 narrow lot homes on what used to be a lot for one home. So that's one thing you could do. We also allow, if you have a single family home, you can have a basement suite or a garage suite. The next phase of our infill is going to be looking at even higher density stuff. We're finding that those houses that we want for the coming generations, the skinny houses, are a lot of money. So we have a lot of work to do on infill to create attainable housing for the emerging generations. Because all the evidence seems to be that they want to live near the core. They want to live near the action. They're far less likely to want to live in far-flung suburban neighborhoods. I mean, I was raised in the suburbs. I raised my kids in the suburbs. I have nothing against the suburbs. I represent an urban area though. So, and the evidence that has been brought to me is that a lot of young people want to live in this ward or across the river in Ward 8 around the university and White Avenue. So we got a lot of work to do on that. We got a lot of work to do, I think, in communicating our reasons. Because you revitalize neighborhoods, you create attainable housing for emerging generations. We also put more tax revenue into areas that already have all the services and roads and fire halls and police stations that are required. So you get a moderation of everyone's property taxes by doing that. You get more of a critical mass of revenue in an area where there was already all those expenses. So that's really important for the financial sustainability of the city too, is to build a more compact city. Sometimes we get accused of that being a cash grab. I would argue it's about moderating everybody's property taxes. And also, we're saving farmland. If we can slow sprawl, we can save farmland, which is vital to food security, vital to local farming, and I think is something we can all take a lot of pride in. I don't remember the exact number of hectares of farmland that we will save, but it's significant. And so all those issues, I think, are issues for, for people you probably are talking to, and that's young people. What kind of city do you want to live in? How do you want it to behave? How do you want it to treat people with who are struggling, income-wise or mental health-wise, or people? We have people in Ward 6 with who are chronically homeless and live with chronic addictions. And it is my view, and the evidence that is proving this out, that if we properly house them in housing that treats them compassionately, allows them to live in dignity, it actually saves gobs of money. Gobs being me. Well, we know that there are probably tens of millions of dollars being spent in Edmonton every year as hospitals, police, bylaw officers, and EMS officials keep dealing with the same population over and over and over again because they're living rough on the street. They're dealing with what is now we know to be lethal, potentially lethal drugs with the opioid crisis. And instead of housing them, we kind of do these outreach services and drop-in services, and I think that's old technology, and we need to finally admit it, and we need collectively to come together and say, would we want anybody to be treated that way? Because people who are homeless are suffering from mental illness, trauma, perhaps generational trauma. And this is not a lifestyle choice. Being on the street and addicted to drugs or alcohol, nobody makes that choice. It's a horrific life, and we have, as a society, treated them like stray animals for too long. It's time that we showed some compassion, recognize these people's humanity, and recognize that they are ill, and start treating this issue with housing and healthcare instead of police, courtrooms, and jails. Jails are not the right place to house people who are mentally ill.
Yeah, and one of the things is that as young people, we do foot the bill as well, right? And everyone will have to foot the bill of that, because if they just keep cycling, they don't get, some sort of recovery process, then they can't become, participating citizens who also contribute to our city.
Yeah.
Right? It's very difficult to break that cycle. And
some of them never will.
Yeah.
That's the other reality here, is some of them are, like 40 years ago, they shuttered a lot of the psychiatric hospitals because that was seen to be a very progressive thing to do at the time, but the governments, whether it was state government or provincial government, didn't invest in enough community supports. So those people started to drift onto the streets. People with profound mental illness could be, their treatment of choice could be fentanyl or alcohol, because it feels better than the way they were feeling before. It moderates their pain or gives them a bit of relief for a while. Ultimately, it's not the answer. It's a dysfunctional way to treat their illness, but we can do a lot better than that. And the other thing, the other sort of economic factor here, because I think when some of us talk about housing the homeless, we get bleeding hearts. We know that we'll save millions and millions of dollars if we properly house our most vulnerable homeless citizens. That I don't think there's any dispute over that, and but we're starting to be able to show that. It's a great facility in Macaulay called Ambrose Place. It's getting really good data to show that this will save piles of money. And Ambrose Place is not cheap. It's got nurses in there, it's got counselors in there, it's got an elder in residence, lots of staff, and they're fed, and they have their own apartments. But still, it's saving considerable money because those people often end up in hospital at emergency rooms numerous times a week. And then if they're admitted, they tend to stay a really long time because living on the street is really hard and you end up really ill. But the other thing is, when you have people who are homeless and mentally ill and perhaps high on drugs or intoxicated on alcohol, and they're hanging around a business area, whether it's Chinatown, Little Italy, downtown, Stony Plain Road, White Avenue, those business areas suffer too, because some people, they get panhandled once and they'll never come back. Yeah. So there's the opportunity cost there for our local business. So I would argue to people that it is really good for the Edmonton economy to solve homelessness. It also would be really good for Edmonton's sense of purpose and for our collective sense of who we are, what we stand for if we ended homelessness. I think it would be something that we all could take great pride in.
Wow, you said so much, and I think I just asked you who you.
I know.
You touched on so many points.
I know. I'm sorry.
I mean, it shows your mind, right? Like, this is what you're thinking about. These are important to you, and you just want to say it, and I love that. So Ward 6 is like a very, very interesting community, one probably very, very unique out of all the different wards that are out here, and like you're representing a very vast, diverse range of people. So one of the things that we like to talk about on YEGnation is cultural diversity and getting women out to vote and participate in the elections and run and be part of city planning, city council, the community of Edmonton. YEGnation. And so I want to know, like, what have you done and what are you doing to try and get more women out, more cultural diversity in city council, in Edmonton leadership, essentially?
Yeah, and I think the first step is to help the communities, which we've done over issues of discrimination. And we will continue to do that work next term. Racism and I would say sexual harassment in the downtown are areas that really, they're dealing with them is a passion of mine. And I've heard, I have daughters, and I finally asked them, I said, so is it really like that you get wolf whistles? And they absolutely. So to work with a group like Men Edmonton, which has a really sort of interesting view on masculinity, they use the term masculinities. I think it is the time that all good men came to the aid of their brothers and sisters who faced discrimination and sexual harassment and bullying. And I can't say that I've seen anybody come up with the right campaign yet. We've talked about maybe next spring or summer establishing a harassment-free zone in a specific area downtown, so the young women could come there. People from various multicultural communities or faiths could come there, and the goal would be, in that area, we will ensure that you have allies, and maybe we'll put on a little music, a little food, and say, this area, you will absolutely be safe. And to do that would be more symbolic than pragmatic. It won't change everything, but you know, we have to carry on this discussion so kids go home to the dinner table and maybe challenge their mom and dad about their language around race and faith and gender identity. We've made a lot of progress. I think the LGBTQ community has probably led the way in many ways, and they might be really good leaders in this too, to tap into the LGBT community and say, how did you do that? Because in about 30 years, they've established their community as a critical part of the political structure, I would argue, or community structure in Edmonton. So I'm disappointed there's not a woman running in Ward 6. Personally, as someone who covered council all those years, I think this last term was a bit of a fluke, having only Councillor Esslinger on council. I covered a lot of extremely courageous and bright and strong women on past councils, including a mayor, Jan Reimer, who made tremendous shifts in this city and the way it dealt with environmental issues. So she was a critical leader. But yeah, there's been many tremendous women leaders, and I would hate for people to look at the council from last term and go, there's something wrong in Edmonton. I mean, there's probably something wrong all over, but I really don't believe it's unique to politics in Edmonton. We have to, you know, I think we have to look at those. What are the barriers? More importantly, what are the barriers? And one of the things I talk about and will continue to talk about is being a sort of a sensitive man and being vulnerable to slings and arrows. And talk about how we as political leaders have to walk the talk of respectful discourse. When you watch Question Period and you see the kind of angry bullying going back and forth, that is really negative leadership and would be the kind of narrative that would, I think, scare a lot of people away from politics. So we have to change that. So we have to demand of politicians at all levels to behave.
Yeah, and as you were saying, like, you know, people don't like the word politician, and there's a reason for that. It's because they see that kind of thing, that kind of rhetoric going around. Yeah.
So I always, and still do, love Amarjeet Sohi, and the way he carried himself all the time. I think I described him in the column several times as the gentleman politician. He didn't get angry. He might have been curious with somebody why they voted the way they did, but it was never shaming or sarcasm or belittling. He is a tremendous leader for men everywhere on how to carry themselves at home and in public as a true gentleman. And I think that kind of behavior from men would not only bring women up to run in politics, but run and want to be allied with men like that. We would break those some of the divisions that remain, and we would all work together. But there's a lot of bully politics left, and there's a lot of sort of toxic masculinity left in politics. I am far from perfect, and I could get angry. I get triggered and get angry to defend myself, and I vowed to work on that this campaign, because I knew, you know, you're a little more stressed out as an incumbent if people are attacking you for what you did. But I want to always remember that I made a commitment, mostly to myself. I just want to be a good man. I'm not ever going to worry about being a great man. I don't know what that looks like, although I would say that Amarjeet Sohi and Don Iveson actually are really close to that descriptor of great man. I'm not worried about trying to reach that. I just want to consider myself, at the end of every day, I want to say, yeah, you're a good man today. And if I can do that, life gets a lot easier, a lot less stressful, a lot less argumentative and fighting. And that is something that I could be proud of.
That's really good to hear. So you have talked a lot for us, so you know, it's been great.
I could go on and on if
I didn't
you
have
want.
To, I didn't have to ask any questions. That's the thing. Like you have so much you
Can we
want to say.
talk a little bit about live music?
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
I would love to hear it.
Well, because, you know, my son's a musician. He moved to Vancouver, which kind of ticked me off. But that's the story. That's the success story in Edmonton. As we have a ton of really talented people, and they move to Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal to further establish their careers. I want them to stay here. I don't know exactly how to do that. We had a couple of events where we brought in club owners and musicians, everybody to talk about it. We'll continue to wrestle with that. There was a guy who was brought in last year who did the music policy for the City of London, England. I think we should bring him back. I'd like to talk about doing that, to establish a live music policy for the City of Edmonton. But you know, we're already doing pretty good too.
Yeah,
when you look at
yeah.
the festivals, the Up and Downtown Music Festival is coming up shortly, and I'm really looking forward to that. But what does it speak to? It speaks to a really healthy cultural city when you have a strong live music scene, and
For
so
sure.
we're going to do whatever we can. And during the campaign, we're going to post some, I don't know if it'll be a daily song, but a song every couple days, ones that I love from local musicians. We might throw in a couple of national or international musicians too, just to show that it's part of the values in the campaign. Values in the campaign are, you know, we've talked about it around them a lot,
Yeah.
but it's creating a supportive, connected community. And we can do that through urban design. We can do that through culture. We can do that through civic policy. And we've got a connected community will not allow for the discrimination and harassment that we've seen some people suffer. And so that's why it's critical that we all work together on that.
For sure, and that's what we want to see you out and voting as well, because you want to make the community the best it can, and we want to see you getting out there and giving your opinions. So October 16th, guys, don't forget to vote. Is there anything, last things you'd like to say to everyone who's watching, to the YEGnation out there?
Well, I'd love to have your support to continue the work we've done on everything from anti-racism to mental health to homelessness to live music. It's been a wide range. I might have to tighten my focus a little bit this next term, or my staff will beat me up. But you know, that sort of progressive agenda to build a great, vibrant, connected modern city. That's what we're out to do.
Awesome. So there's going to be a ward forum here. When is that exactly?
There is a ward forum coming up
Thursday, next Thursday.
October.
No, September 28th.
September. There's a ward forum on September 28th.
All right, September 28th, guys, come out. You can actually meet Scott in person and have a chat with him, talk about politics. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Scott.
Thank you. My pleasure too.
Yes, so everyone out there in YEGnation, give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. It's been a great time here with Scott. See you later.